John has a question to Pastor Sandy, and go ahead, John.
Gay marriage is such a new thing, and there's not a cultural history that like straight marriage has, where folks have, it's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's a lot of history. People can talk to each other. There's many books about it. There's a track of getting married. Usually you have children, or maybe you have a career, then you have children, and then children leave and you have a new relationship past that. It's a little bit more challenging for gay people to have children, so the path is a little bit different. I'm just curious how you have experienced in your life, your marriage, and has it really changed your interaction with the world at large?
I think those are great questions, John. Since 2015 here in the United States, we've had marriage equality, and I've had the privilege of, performing a lot of, same-sex marriages, and it's been a really powerful experience. I've been together with my partner, Janet, for 35 years now, this February, and it's to me, I look at marriage the way I believe God does, and God looks at marriage in the sense of it's a covenant. God's a covenant God, and so you can go down to the courthouse, which everyone can do now, and you can get married, and you can, get that stamp and get it notarized, and that's really powerful. But God looks at marriage in the sense of it's two people coming together and becoming one, and that's what happened in the Garden of Eden. Where God looked at this guy Adam and said, Adam was kind of lonely. He's talking to the animals too long, and so created Eve. And so that the two could become one and bless them. And so I think that God is a covenant God, and he looks at people and he doesn't want us to be alone. And so as people who are attracted to the opposite sex, I think it's wonderful that now we can have a formalized agreement the society recognizes. And I think it's really wonderful. And I think it's a huge stride for us in the United States, because even for Janet and I, we've been married for many years prior to 2015, and actually we got married in 2008 when it was okay in California for about 4 months there. So we got married legally then, but we consider that we were married back in 1986. When we got married before God with a group of people and a pastor, and we exchanged vows, and we made a covenant before God, and we said that we would love each other and that we would walk together through this life. And so to me, God is a covenant God, and he wants us to make covenant with one another. And so throughout the Bible, we see a mixed match of marriages, but if you really go down to the root, it's really about covenant. For example, if you go, we have a lot of folks today that they say, Pastor Sandy, marriage is supposed to be between a man and a woman, and the church can't change because this is the way it's been in the Bible forever, and this is the way church tradition is, and so why are we changing it now? This is wrong. And I always tell them, have you really looked at what the Bible offers as far as marriage? Because besides Adam and Eve, we've got David, who had, 3 or 4 wives, and then he had all these concubines. We had Solomon, who had, I think, 600 or 700 concubines. I mean, Abraham, he had a couple wives too. You think of Jacob. Jacob wanted to marry Rachel and ended up kind of getting, I think he had a little bit too much to drink his wedding night. He ended up with Leah, the sister. The dad kind of swindled him, and so then he had to work longer to be able to marry the love of his life. And so he had these 2 wives, and out of that came the 12 patriarchs. And so all of that is a mixed match in the Bible. So what is God's intent? That's really what we have to look at. And I think God's intent is that 2 people come together, just like Adam and Eve. and they come together and they become one. I don't think it's God's best to have multiple wives. I don't think it ever worked really, really well. I don't think it's God's best to have multiple partners. I think God really wants us to find that person that we can walk through life with and have that commitment with, and that we can become one. And I always tell people when I am preparing them to be able to perform their wedding and preparing them in marriage, I always tell them, only God can make two people who are so separate, who are so individual, only God can make those two people one. And so I think it's a work of the Holy Spirit. And so I'm all for marriage equality. I was for it back in 2008 here in California when Prop 13 was going crazy. I was excited in 2015 when it became the law of the land. And I'm excited because it allows LGBTQ people a way to express themselves and to come into relationship so that then the broader society recognizes not just God, not just their friends, but also the broader society. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
I think it's wonderful too because it gives everyone an opportunity to feel more integrated into society. As gay people, we spend so much time outside society. We feel almost like outlaws. And the opportunity to marry is like the final step that allows us to integrate in society in a way that we feel equal and celebrated. I've seen a few marriages that are just spectacular, you know, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we finally got to that point.
Yeah, and I've been surrounded by people with really strong relationships, and in this church we have a lot of couples with real longevity. And I just learned recently that there's kind of this misnomer with gay couples. There's been this story around gay men that gay men are never going to end up in a relationship that's going to be viable and strong and satisfying, and that there's a lot of breakups or divorce now. But I read this study that said that actually gay men are very stable in marriage relationships and have success. And so I think that God's changing all of our minds and getting us all back to this place where we can come back to covenant. Let's forget about traditions for a minute, and let's really look at what is a marriage. And I think it's a marriage is when two people come together in love and then God blesses them. And that's what it's all about.
It's almost as if humanity has finally caught up to where God was going.
I think so. I think so. And I hope that this continues in more nations, and there are still places, around the world that are so restrictive, and there are places in the world where people can't choose, kind of like Bible days, where people can't choose who to love, and they're being set up in marriages and this and that. And all of that needs to stop. And we need to get back to the Garden of Eden. We need to get back to God's original plan, which is two people really loving each other. Some people say, well, Pastor Sandy, God made male and female, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But I tell you what, God blesses gay marriages, God blesses lesbian couples, God blesses us just the same, because it's the same covenant, and God enters into that.
Love Long Beach because, as you can see, it's beautiful. You can live right on the beach, on the coast. It's not super expensive to live here. We have a wonderful gay-friendly mayor, and the city is very diverse, and people love it. It's very eclectic down here.
I love Long Beach because we have the desert, we have the mountains, and we have the ocean. And the ocean calls me, and I love it.
And the weather here is fantastic.
It is perfect. You all have to come and visit Long Beach.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I'd like to introduce you to Janet Robertson. She is the love of my life, and we've been blessed to be able to be married for 35 years now this year. We've actually been married 3 times legally here in the United States and also in Scotland. So just wonderful, and Janet is also not just my wife, not just beautiful,